Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. A controversial road project in Bloomington is back on the table.
It's not going to benefit a lot of people to close it, and it's going to hurt a lot of us, and we're going to really be frustrated.
Should part of Old 37 be limited to bikes and pedestrians, or should it stay the way it is and be open to vehicles as well? Schools can now use state money to provide teachers with firearms training.
How many lives could have been saved had any of those teachers or staff had the means and ability to defend themselves?
Coming up, details about the new legislation and why it might be hard to track down whether your local school is taking advantage of the program. Plus, Hoosiers owe tens of millions of dollars to utility companies. Ahead, a look at the debt load and which utilities have the most customers behind on their bills. These stories, plus the latest news headlines from across the state, right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. Bloomington's mayor and some residents are at odds over whether to close a portion of a road to vehicle traffic in order to provide better connectivity to the city's major parks. The mayor is finishing up his last term. He wants to push through changes to Old State Road 37 before he leaves office. But some residents don't understand why he's reopening the debate over Lower Cascades Park that they thought was settled. The mayor's staff presented its proposal to the city council this week, and as Lucas Gonzalez reports, it's the first time we've seen the proposal explained on paper.
Here at Lower Cascades Park, Mayor John Hamilton wants to close a portion of this road and make it a biker pedestrian trail. But many people say they like it just the way it is. Dozens of people gathered at the Northside Park Saturday to voice opposition to Hamilton's plan to restrict driver access to part of the road. Hamilton wants to close a roughly half-mile stretch between Clubhouse Drive and North College Avenue at Miller Showers Park for a new trail. It's part of his administration's plan to establish a path connecting the city's major parks. The road, which runs all the way through Lower Cascades, is how many say they access the park and navigate through town during major sporting events. David Bowden, who attended the weekend rally, says Hamilton's plan would impede access for elderly and mobility-restricted visitors.
We plead with Mayor Hamilton to consider the fact that it's not going to benefit a lot of people to close it, and it's going to hurt a lot of us, and we're going to really be frustrated.
Many believe Hamilton's plan favors non-drivers. Others say a partial road closure would impede first responders' ability to get to emergencies on time. Attendee Jamie Scholl says Hamilton's not listening to those who say they want the road untouched.
The townies, those who grew up here, like myself, often feel they're ignored, and those I've talked to do not want the road closed.
Hamilton's plan goes against his own staff's recommendation to keep the road open to drivers. That recommendation followed a community survey and pilot study on closing the road. Critics of Hamilton's plan also say it ignores the results of a survey taken during the pilot project. Most respondents preferred keeping all lanes of the road open to drivers, as opposed to closing one or both lanes. Most of the rally attendees opposed Hamilton's plan and supported leaving the road as it is, but there were some detractors. Greg Alexander, who serves on the state's traffic commission, says the road is not safe for bicyclists or pedestrians, despite it having speed bumps.
I want the path to be open for bike and ped, for my kids, because my kids have actually come to this park a lot less than they could, because we met this barrier of about a mile of roadway that's not a safe place to walk.
Alexander was the only one to speak so adamantly against leaving the road open. Others, including City Council member Isabel Piedmont Smith, spoke favorably of Hamilton's plan, but didn't explicitly reject the other options. Piedmont Smith took the podium to clarify that Hamilton wants to close only part of the road to drivers, not entirely remove driver access to the park.
accessibility is not just cars, and public rights of way are not just to get cars around, but to get people around in various ways that they might choose to get around.
After Piedmont Smith spoke, several attendees argued with her point and spoke over her all at once. Someone eventually interrupted, urging the crowd to let her finish. And at one point, she responded to an attendee who asked her to explicitly state her position.
You said you wouldn't say whether you're for or against it. Why won't you? You're on the council.
Well, because I'm looking out here and I see pitchforks.
To date, Hamilton has not submitted a formal proposal for his plan to City Council. The organizers of the Saturday rally say they want as many people as possible to voice their opinions at future City Council meetings. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Lucas Gonzalez.
Now, the city presented 4 options for the council to consider at this week's meeting: convert the road to a trail, keep the road as it is, make it part one-way for drivers and part multi-purpose trail, or build a new separated path. Many opponents to Hamilton's plan expressed support for building a separated multi-purpose path. The city estimates that option would cost about $3 million. It says a road conversion would cost significantly less, though it has not given a cost estimate. Mayor Hamilton or the council itself may get the wheels turning on a vote, Hamilton by submitting a proposal or a council member by sponsoring an ordinance or resolution. Now, either way, draft legislation proposed either by Hamilton or by a council member would have to be introduced in a first reading at a later meeting. Hoosiers owe nearly $46 million to the state's 5 big utility companies. Leslie Bonilla Muniz is a reporter with the Indiana Capital Chronicle, and a new story she published shows how many Hoosiers are behind on their utility bills and which companies have the most customers in debt. Leslie joins us now from Indianapolis to talk about her recent reporting. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Leslie, you crunched numbers from the state's Office of Utility Consumer Counselor to come up with this figure, about $45.6 million owed to utilities, big number. But your reporting shows is that figure, it doesn't really paint the whole picture, does it?
Yeah, no. So it's about 186,000 people around the state that owe that amount of money, or they did in March. That's the most recent month that we have data for all 5 of the investor-owned utilities. But you're right. We only have data from those 5 electric, natural gas, and electric companies. So that means that everyone else is left out. So that's people that get their electric and natural gas service through municipal entities, as well as through rural electric membership cooperatives or REMCs. And we are also not really even considering water and wastewater service. So it's a lot of money, but it is not everyone.
So can you provide some perspective or context around these numbers? And are they pretty average? Do they show a different story?
We don't have a lot of context, and that's because this is only the second time that we've gotten this data. The first was during the pandemic when the state was shutting down, people were really struggling, and the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, which is a state agency that advocates specifically for utility customers, and a couple of other groups asked state regulators to mandate reporting, and they did. And they did that again when we started seeing, this really high inflation. But you could compare the second round of data to the first, but we really don't have historical data because we don't require reporting in like normal periods of time.
Yeah, so this data, though, hasn't been publicly available in the past. Why are we getting it now, and how is it intended to be used?
Yeah, when they made the most recent filing, the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor cited that high inflation, and I believe that Commissioner referred to it as a perfect storm of economic conditions. So that's why we're getting it this time. But it only goes through March of 2024, and the settlement agreement that is leading to these data submissions says that the office can't even apply or to ask for another round of data until we hit that March of 2024 deadline, and they'll have to start it as a separate case. So it's possible that we could see more, but for now, this is definitely quite temporary. And I want to add that state bills proposing action like this haven't really gotten anywhere. So that is why we don't have, consistent
All right.
Like, this is definitely a case-by-case basis.
We have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton says he's concerned the county commissioners approved a capital improvement board without an interlocal agreement in place. I talked with Mayor Hamilton on the board that's charged with overseeing the Monroe Convention Center expansion project. The commissioners approved the board a couple weeks ago. 3 of those are appointed by the city, 3 by the county, and 1 appointed by the city and county appointed members. Hamilton says the board needs a plan before it moves forward.
I did have a meeting the week before last, with a county commissioner. We've been trying to sit down for a long time, more than a year, and talk about options. And so I'm hopeful that that can continue.
A draft interlocal agreement includes some terms City Council asked for late last year, but the mayor's office doesn't support it.
These are complicated, big projects. I sometimes remind the county that you guys, you need to build a jail. You need to focus on getting that done. That criminal justice reform is also complicated.
The commissioner said their deadline for getting an interlocal agreement ratified is December 1st, but they hope to complete it sooner. County appointments confirmed so far include CEO Chamber of Commerce Eric Spoonmore, former Commissioner Joyce Poling, and former Ivy Tech Chancellor John Weikart. The city has made no appointments so far. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Schools can now use state money to provide teachers firearms training. A good investment in school safety or a reckless decision. And the dome at the historic West Baden Hotel was damaged in last month's storms. Ahead, the atrium is reopened, but how long will it take to complete the repairs? These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
I've always believed that people are at the heart of every story we tell.
Any story or interview that makes people who watch it say, I hadn't thought of it in that way. That, for me, is gold.
I like to be able to leave the viewer with some sort of emotion, whether it's outrage, whether it's someone overcoming long odds, telling a big story through an individual story.
What makes the NewsHour different is that we have time to be thoughtful about the stories that we tell, the voices that we intend to elevate.
I know the role that good journalism plays in making all of us feel more connected to each other, in helping all of us understand each other a little bit better. I see this as a mission, and I see this as a service.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Indiana students and teachers are preparing to head back to school. It will be the first full academic year since lawmakers passed legislation allowing schools to get state money to cover the cost of firearms training for teachers. As Clayton Baumgarth reports, the lawmaker who pushed for the new legislation says training teachers will ultimately save the state money because schools will need fewer safety resource officers.
Being a teacher in 2023 is a far cry from what it was when Roma Jean Bradburn retired from the Fort Wayne Community School System in 2001.
Parents today expect immediate response on how their child did on assignments and on tests. Immediate response. We used to be able to stack the tests up and get to them.
Technology, testing, funding, it's all different. Another big change is school safety. State lawmakers just approved House Bill 1177 in the spring. It creates an avenue for teachers to go through firearm training and have it paid for through the state's Secured School Safety Grant Program. That's a $23 million pot of money that pays for everything from school resource officers to metal detectors.
I don't believe there should be any guns in the schools, other than your security guards and your policemen that come in.
The identities of those who enroll, participate in, and complete the training are kept confidential. That makes it difficult to determine how many school corporations intend to participate in the state-funded training. But teachers are only eligible if their district allows them to carry firearms at school. For many, like Roma, the idea of arming teachers as an added form of security opens up a plethora of new questions. How would the weapon be stored? Would a teacher be compelled to leap into action in the event of an emergency? And would having a gun in class make everybody safer?
It wouldn't take much for anybody to overpower a teacher if they knew that you had a gun on you. And then if you didn't have it on you, it'd have to be locked up. It would have to be in a locked place, and most classrooms don't have very adequate places to lock things up.
Representative Jim Lucas of Seymour authored the bill. He says the goal of the legislation is to prevent an event like the Uvalde, Texas school shooting, where the shooter wasn't neutralized for nearly an hour and a half from happening in Indiana.
During that time, how many lives could have been saved had any of those teachers or staff had the means and ability to defend themselves?
The training required by the bill in order to receive grant money was developed by Lucas with the help of law enforcement officials to cover the specific instance of an active shooter in a school environment, on top of the existing 40 hours of standard firearm training.
Teachers and staff that go through this training are, some could argue, better qualified than a freshman fresh out of the academy law enforcement officer.
And by his estimates, Lucas says that training teachers to use firearms is cheaper than hiring a safety resource officer.
A school resource officer, the average salary and benefits for an SRO in Indiana is about $65,000. For that 1 year salary, you can train approximately 40 teachers and staff. So your deterrent factor, you have magnified that by a factor of 40 right there.
Schools most likely to benefit from House Bill 1177 are those located in rural areas where law enforcement resources are spread thin. And according to the Indiana Small and Rural Schools Association, there are only, quote, 1 or 2 schools that allow teachers to carry a firearm on campus. One of those, Jay County School Corporation, responded to our request to interview with the following statement. At this time, we do not currently plan to send any teachers to training reimbursable by the school safety grant described in House Bill 1177. However, we will consider this new grant-funded program moving forward for future training needs. For Paul Farmer, a teacher and president of the Monroe County Education Association, there are better ways that state money could be reallocated.
They have a $2 billion surplus this past year. They're going to take that money and they're going to help pay for potentially teachers having handguns in the classroom. Most people, I think anyway, and me personally as an individual, is going to go, we could use this money better.
Specifically, Farmer says the money could help fund better mental health programming to prevent shootings in the first place.
I would like to see more, and I think the association and teachers would like to see more emphasis placed on help, the critical help that our students need today.
For Farmer and Roma Jean Bradburn, legislation like House Bill 1177 does little to make them feel safer in schools. In fact, for Roma, only one law will do that.
The only thing that will solve the problem is to ban assault rifles, automatic rifles and guns, anything that makes a gun automatic.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
In addition to firearms training, schools can also use the funding in the event of a school shooting to pay for counseling for students, teachers, and other school employees. And now for the latest on this week's top stories, Lucas Gonzalez joins us for news headlines. Hello, Lucas.
Thanks, Joe. The number of COVID cases in Indiana has been relatively stable all summer. Deaths and hospitalizations also aren't spiking like they did at the height of the pandemic. Data reported by the Regan Street Institute shows Indiana counted 47 COVID-19 deaths. Researchers say it's likely these deaths are people who fall into vulnerable categories, such as older adults or people with health conditions.
Making sure that you're vaccinated, that you're protected enough, makes a lot of sense for those individuals.
Regan Street's dashboard shows the state's 7-day moving average for COVID-19 is at 20%, which was 34 positive tests. Nationally, wastewater concentration for COVID-19 has been on the rise since the end of June. It's doubled between the end of June and today. 2021 was a big year for solar. Half of all the solar capacity Indiana has today came online that year, but the state added only about a third as much last year. Experts say, among other things, so many renewable energy projects asking to be connected to the grid at once is causing delays. About 6,000 megawatts of solar are under construction in the state or in development.
It's become a real backlog and bottleneck for clean energy plants trying to come online across the country, not just in Indiana. And it's taking 3 or 4 years on average now.
2022 was the last year Hoosiers could take advantage of higher net metering rates, or the rate that residents with solar panels get paid for delivering extra energy to the grid. Schulk says early numbers he's seen from Indiana utilities this year show that very few people are signing up for solar with the new lower net metering rates. Indiana farmers have planted a record 1.6 million acres of cover crops this year, according to the 2023 Conservation Survey. Cover crops include rye, legumes, and clover. About 10% of Indiana's 12 million acre farmland has cover crops, compared to barely 1% 10 years ago. Cover crops help farmers in southern Indiana with erosion due to hilly landscapes. In flatter landscapes in northern Indiana, cover crops help build organic matter and control weed growth. On the presidential campaign trail, Mike Pence is essentially trying to reinvent himself as he reintroduces himself to the people in the early voting state of New Hampshire. Pence largely avoided talking about his years as vice president at an event last week and did not utter Trump's name. He instead introduced himself like this: "I'm Mike Pence. I'm from Indiana, and I'm running for president."
I'm well known, but I'm not known well. And to have the opportunity to come to settings like this and spend the last several days traveling across New Hampshire, and as we've been to states since we announced, it's so encouraging to me to hear people can learn more about us, our family, our heart.
Pence has been dragged down by the powerful undertow of Trumpism. He barely registered in a new poll released last week by the University of New Hampshire, and he's admitted he does not have enough donors to qualify for the opening presidential debate next month. State Rep Jim Lucas is not serving on any interim study committees this year after he pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanors related to his drunken driving arrest in May. The Seymour Republican has said he has no plans to step down. Lucas has a history of controversy, and in 2020, the Speaker of the House also kept Lucas off all committees because of comments he made on social media that many considered racist. The Indiana University Jewish Culture Center plans to use a new grant to help combat anti-Semitism. The center's director says a donor made the gift in response to the rise in far-right hatred of Jewish people across the country, especially on college campuses. The center plans to host more events that will allow Jewish and non-Jewish students to interact and learn from each other, as well as take part in IU's First Experience program.
A lot of students aren't going to want to attend any sort of intellectual or important sort of thing when they have other things they got to do. You know, they've got social lives, they've got academic, probably work lives also, you know, they don't have time for that. So it costs money to do that. It costs times to fund things, and we're really appreciative.
An American Jewish Committee report published in February found that most Midwestern Jews say anti-Semitism is a problem that's getting worse. Part of the IU grant will also fund research efforts focused on countering anti-Semitism. An Indiana University graduate killed in a helicopter crash in Alaska is being remembered as a brilliant student and curious soul. Tori Moore was from South Bend. She earned her bachelor's degree in geological sciences and environmental sciences from IU. She went to Alaska to work for the Alaska Department of Natural Resources to work in the field, install weather stations, and catalog inventory.
Tori loved life. She loved that spirit of inquiry, of looking into things. She pursued what she really, really loved.
Moore was among 3 scientists plus a pilot who died in the crash. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating. Work isn't finished, but the West Baden Hotel atrium is reopened to the public. It's been closed for about 3 weeks after a severe storm damaged many of the glass roof panels in the historic dome. Crews have worked to put up coverings on the windows while they wait for construction plans to be finalized. In the meantime, the atrium has been deemed safe.
Everybody's jumping in. They know this is a historic landmark. They want it repaired. We'll get it repaired. They want to work with us. So everybody's just been fantastic to work with.
In addition to the glass panels in the roof, crews have also installed new carpet in the atrium, repaired some other structures on the property, replaced some windows, and a few street lamps. Franz hopes construction will be complete by winter. And Joe, Franz told us that he doesn't yet know how much it's going to cost to make all the storm repairs.
All right, good to hear. Thanks, Lucas. Dangerous heat smothering the state will start to move out this weekend. Temperatures been in the 90s this week. The heat index topped 105 today. It's part of the same heat dome that's been affecting the southern part of the country for a while. National Weather Service says the above average temperatures are expected to dip back to the seasonal average by the end of next week. Temperatures are predicted to be closer to 80 degrees. That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber Internet, streaming TV, home security and automation in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. LawMG.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. Rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.